Basically, I'm going to share with you what I would do. Once I know the address of the house, then what am I going to do? How am I going to come together, or how am I going to try to get my valuation together? My way is not the only way. It's probably the worst way of all three of us, but it is a way. Okay? So as soon as I get the value of the house, the first thing I'm going to do is pull up the tax record. That's not really, astounding information. So I'll put it in there. Everybody knows how to do that. And this is the tax record. So the house is 9835 Little Rock Court. Now, I'm pretty familiar with the neighborhood because when I first started out, Mr. Chenault and I were the site agents in the Green Ridge neighborhood. So I happen to know a little bit more information. So once I get that, then I'm going to look at several things that are in the tax record. I'm going to really focus on, I'm going to look at the assessment just because the seller looks at the assessment. I'm going to look at the lot size. I'm going to look at the square footage. So you can see all this stuff as we go, where's my little thing here? As we go down. So here's the assessment right here. Here's the lot size right here. Here is the square footage stuff. So you can see the 2466 is the building square footage. Now, is that always accurate? No. It's not, but in this case, we're going to assume it is. Then the other thing I do, once I do that, then I'll go back to the top and I'll look at the last listing. All right, so you can see this was on the market in 22, sold in 22, and I'll just sort of verify. So they had the 2466, and then I'm visual, so I try to get pictures if I can find pictures. This is really easy because the pictures are here. So we'll all look at it together and we'll assume that the house is in the same condition. Obviously, if you're talking, if you can call the seller, ask them if they've done anything, any upgrades, anything else, could they have wrecked the house in a year? They could have, but we're assuming it just for these kind of case purposes. So you see like a modern bathroom. I assumed after looking at these pictures that the house is in very good condition. Rodney, what kind of house is that, if you remember?
Marquise?
I was thinking that's a Kingston. Or is that the hip roof is a Marquise?
That is a, Kingston was Bronner.
Yeah, this is the same one?
That is the same one, for sure.
Okay, very good.
The back bay window in the back of the house.
Yeah, and this bay window too. Anyway, enough about that.
That's the same one.
So does that make sense to everybody? So see that. Another thing I'll look at, I'll see like if these were the same people, I'll look and see what they paid for it. Is that going to be on the minds of the seller? Sure, I just want to know that. Does that have anything to do with the value of the house? Really doesn't, but it's nice to know. Another thing I'll do next is I'll look up Zillow, because as we all know, Zillow is the divine Hochi Finochi of everything, and the seller has certainly looked at Zillow, so I want to know at least what the seller thinks it's worth, and basically the seller is going to be thinking it's somewhere around this because the God of real estate, Zillow, has told them so, right? Okay, so everybody sort of with me on that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a search. I'm going to try to search relevant properties, and this is definitely what we call the comparative market analysis. And I've already done it. I'm going to pull it up right here, and then I'll show you the criteria. Okay. So we can do coming soon. I don't know if this is the right one. We'll do the same thing. Coming soon, active, pending. This is not the right search. Let me get another one. Hold that here. Not that one. It's this one. I don't know where it went. We'll just do a whole different one. All right, so I like to look at, let me clear this out. I like to look at coming soon, active, come on, coming soon. Come on. Active, pending, and sold. 180 days, last 6 months is pretty relevant. If you can't, if nothing comes up, then I go back further, even out to a year, even sometimes past a year if there isn't. But we're gonna be in pretty good shape here. What's really important about this area where this house is? What's a really good way you can narrow it down, apples to apples? Atlee High School is what I would say. So I did Atlee High School. Atlee High School, and then I did square footage. Remember, this house was, the square footage was 2466. So let's look at, say, 2300 to 2650, something like that. Does that sound good? All right, now that's 40 matches on that. And you'll see why here in just a second. So the first thing we're going to look at is houses that are on the market. All right, here. All right, does that look like a relevant house based on what we just saw? Now, this is more of a one-level kind of property, not exactly what we're looking at here. How about that one? Brand new house. Nice to know, but that's a to-be-built kind of a property. I don't think that's all that relevant either. The house that the subject was built in 1996. Different value, different whole, so we're not really going to pay too much attention to that. Charter Lake is a whole different kind of situation. So this one is pending. All right, pending is a good test because this house was on the market, similar square footage, right? It's only 38 square feet difference, right? But here's the problem. If you read, and I'll try to go through this quickly, but if you read through the information, you can either read through it or you can look through these photos and you'll see this house is being sold as is. Looks pretty good right there.
It's a dog track.
Yeah, carpet is bad. Everything is just as it was when they bought it in 1999. Right, so this house doesn't have upgraded kitchen, doesn't have upgraded baths, paint is original, and in Jake's words, it's a dog track.
That's
Alright.
the house of those electrical things I showed you?
Yeah,
That's that house.
very good. They don't take pictures of the electrical problems that they have right there. All right, so if you're looking at the seller, the seller's going to say, well, wow, 400,000. That's a lot less than I think my house is worth. Well, obviously your house is in better condition than this. This house, similar, comparable neighborhood, but a lot. The condition is much less. Now, one thing I would do, and I didn't do in this case because we're just sort of doing this for training purposes, is I would have called the listing agent and found out, try to get an idea how much they got for it. It's not public information yet, but you can sort of fish around and find out, because this house was on the market only 4 days and went under contract. So they probably got higher than asking price for that, but you never know. You never know. What about this one? Ash Creek, right? 2,500 square feet, 474, pended. Brian Jones, agent right here, Hometown Realty, put this under contract. This date, when I see 47 days on the market, I instantly go to this purple thing and I click the purple thing and I look and see that, they started high, they brought it down, it's been under contract, off contract, so can be a little stigmatized over time, right? So I don't really like that, and I sometimes think that can affect the actual value. If you start too high, then maybe the value is really not as you think it is. So here's another one in the neighborhood, 475, 2,600 square feet. Does that house remind you at all of the one we just looked at?
Yep.
So if you look at this, go through some of the photos. How does this one look? Blue curtains are nice. This thing didn't go but so fast, trying to get to the kitchen. You can see in the kitchen, has the kitchen been modernized and updated? We'll assume just to speed this up that the baths and everything aren't either. So this is a nice house, same neighborhood, but not as many bells and whistles, right? Would this be one you definitely want to use in your CMA? 100%, probably the most relevant one in there. We'll sort of go, we'll sort of fast forward to some other ones that are very relevant.
You know, you got 5.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, you can see there's a lot of, how about that house? Is that a really relevant comp? No, older, that's the Potamy. I'm sure the house is fine. That looks like the Stoneman's house, right? Remember that? Sold out back in the day. So there's one other in the sold category. Sorry, this house right here. Now this house is all brick. Rodney and I obviously know the history of this house, but this house is a very nice house. However, if you look at the inside of it, you'll see, what's the first word you think of when we get to the inside pictures here? What do you start thinking of? What do you think? What do you think? Modern?
No.
I mean, does it look like the model homes that you go into?
No.
No, it's dated. Carpets gathered. See the little crease in the carpet? That's a, you know, people just don't like that. Do people love blue baths, pink walls?
Is that a step-through tub there?
I'm not sure, but it does have a screen porch. So just to sort of simplify where we're going here, so I try to pick a couple actives. In this case, there really isn't a very relevant active. Those pendings, in this case, there's some good ones that would be pending that are in there, but then as far as the best comparables are gonna be this one and the other house in the neighborhood that was 470 something. So based on the condition of the subject house, I think we're talking somewhere around 485 is what my valuation would be. I'm going to show you, I'll let y'all sort of pass this around while the other guys are presenting to give you an idea of what happens. So once I have the comparables, go to one other tab here. How much time I got?
2 minutes and 28 seconds.
All right, I go to this Toolkit CMA website, and basically all you have to do here to create this presentation is just basically select the listings and download them right in here. It takes 2 seconds. I've already done it just to give you an idea, and then you wind up with, takes a second to print it up here, but you wind up with a, you know, this all stuff is pre-done. You spend about 2 hours getting all this stuff together, and once you have this, then it sort of puts it in this format where you have a map of your comparables, some propaganda about marketing, and then it'll select each of the houses. Remember what was that? That's the dog track.
Mm-hmm.
You see there's one in Castlewood, the one we just talked about, and so on. And it gives you, you know, a nice organized presentation that you could then go to the seller's house and go through that if you'd like to do it like that and give you an idea of what's going on. So again, I think based on what we've seen here, the value, I would tell the seller probably somewhere around 485, and Zillow sort of ironically lines up with that as well. So I think that's where they would be. So that's what I got. Any questions about that? Excellent. I'll get out of this and then let Larry do his thing, and we'll rock and roll.
So, hopefully we're kind of following a bit of the same pattern, but we're gonna take a look at kind of how I run my comps, and then what I then do with them once I have them. And so, we kind of intentionally did it separately so you can kind of see if there's any differences and whatnot. But this was kind of a fun thing for me. I presented my B&I group the other week, and I had a subject property to my B&I group and called on a couple people who, you know, they're pretty intelligent real estate folks, and said, all right, here's, you know, I basically had this open. I said, here's our MLS system, you price this house, like, what are you gonna do, what are your parameters? And like their answers and the way they did it was not as smart as I think they traditionally were. And so for me, it was just kind of shocking. Like, there's a way more of an art than there is a science to this. And I think you'll see that maybe between the three of us, that we do things a little bit differently. And then the other thing too is every house is a little different. So this one's a pretty easy one because it's like a suburb house. And so this is definitely more within my kind of default way of running comps. But the more unique the property, or the further out it is, or the more land it has, or the less land it has, all of a sudden I'm having to tweak some things and experiment. So at least for me, the way I run my comps are, I pulled up the property and I look at the tax record, get familiar with it. Sometimes I'm looking at, previous listing history, different things like that, seeing if it tried to sell at a certain price, or, if it sold recently, all that good stuff. And then certainly I have a email or a set of questions that I'm traditionally asking the seller on the front end. Some of those good ones are, certainly, can you confirm the square footage for me? Because tax records have the square footage wrong a whole lot. And a lot of my metrics and analytics are gonna be off the overall size of the house. And if it's missing an entire, floor that's been finished off, that's really gonna skew the numbers. And I'm gonna look silly when I show up. I also love asking the question of rate your house 1 through 10. How would you rate the condition? And then they give me a number there, and then I say, okay, what would make it a 10? And they're already basically telling me the things that they're, maybe insecure about, or knowing what is an issue on the front end. And so then when I'm looking at other comps, I can point out, like if they're saying their carpets are really bad, when I'm looking at some other comps, I'm like, oh, this one has hardwoods everywhere. So like, that it should sell for a little bit more. So I do some stuff like that. But as it relates to actual comps, I am going to open up MLS. I'm going to select all. So coming soon, actives, pendings, the whole gamut. We're looking back at the last 6 months. I kind of keep it with that default 0-180. This is a single family house. I'm going to do single family residence. And then I always do the same elementary school and the same high school. That gets me a pretty good geographical search. Unless I'm in like a hot market, like a Bellevue or a Lakeside, sometimes then I'm doing more of a geographical, but I don't usually like relying on a map, because that relies on the intelligence of the listing agent and that they put the place marker in the right spot and label things right and stuff like that. But I do find elementary school and high school works pretty well. I also always try to think of myself, or put myself in the buyer's shoes. What are the most likely parameters a buyer is considering? And so certainly high school is almost like a definite for me. And then usually I put that extra layer of elementary school as well. But certainly I have buyers that specifically only want one, high school district. So I do elementary school and high school. I do plus or minus 300 square feet. So this house is 2466, so I did exactly plus or minus 300, so 2166 to 2766. A slightly bigger house, and I might go plus or minus 500 square feet. And then I go plus or minus 10 years on construction. Certainly for a house like this is kind of middle of the road, and so I don't want to be compared to a brand new house over in Atlee District. I don't want to be compared to something super old. So I go plus or minus 10 years. That gets me like kind neighborhoods. Very rarely will I ever keep it within one neighborhood. Some agents, that's the only thing they look at is just that specific neighborhood. But again, rarely have I ever had a buyer say, I only want this neighborhood. Usually it's, I want to be in this school district. So I want to make sure I'm looking at similar type of neighborhoods, but on the back end, I'm also preparing myself to know exactly what's going on in that specific neighborhood. But I won't use that in my overall comps. So plus or minus 10 years. On this one specifically, I also included that it has a garage. This house has a garage, so I want to look at some other houses that have a garage. And I'm really trying to get this number here, the 17 matches. I mean, a sweet spot for me is like around 10. Plus or minus around that 10 mark. So even at 17, this is a little bit too much. But I've kind of messed around with most all the parameters that I feel comfortable with in this one. So then I would go through the results, and our subject house has a second floor primary, and so in my opinion, anything with a first floor primary is an entirely different animal, and it's an entirely different buyer set, or that first floor primary should sell for more than mine because it's got a lot more of a buyer pool than a second floor primary. So like this one over in Deer Valley, I would take this one out. So I've selected them all, but I would take out anything with a first floor primary. So out of my 17, just really quickly, I've already done this on my end, but I would look through the pictures, I would look at where the primary bedroom is, I look to see if there's anything that's like an outlier on this that like either it sold crazy too cheap because it's a distressed property, or you know, just kind of odd, or crazy too expensive because it was some sort of rare property. So I would just kind of look through these, do some checking on the pictures, try to take a look at the condition of them. Again, keeping in mind one's actually in the same neighborhood, so this neighborhood's Green Ridge, so definitely want to see what's going on at Green Ridge. And ultimately what I would do then is, I think I got to like 14, and so for me, I already have an export setting, so I'll export these all into a spreadsheet, and I have a saved export setting for CMAs, and this just kind of gets me the nuts and bolts of some of the really important numbers that I want to look at. So I'll export that. The biggest reason why I export it is because I use Cloud CMA. Anybody use Cloud CMA or heard Cloud CMA? That's the toolkit, yeah, that's the toolkit thing that I use. And all I basically do is copy and paste my MLS numbers into this system, and it already has very cool looking kind of listing presentation template that that I'll be using for myself. But you need the, so this will be the printout, I'll show you that in a little bit, but you need the MLS numbers. Tweak it. Oops. So you need the MLS numbers, and so because I do a spreadsheet, I can then copy and paste this whole column, and then I can just throw it down here in the Cloud CMA, and then once I have those numbers, basically to create my actual printout, it's like 4 steps. I'll just undo it real quick, see if that helps. This part isn't necessarily all that important unless you're using Cloud CMA, but it's a very user-friendly one.
Is your computer on top of is the remote up there?
Oh yeah.
Maybe hit the remote. I don't know what button to press to get back.
You think that's doing something crazy?
And Jim can see it fine.
You guys don't like the blue tint?
I'm not a good man, so.
I think it's this. I bet that's it. Anyways, Cloud CMA, it's just there we go. Couple step process. So this is my my MLS numbers. It automatically pulls this out of our MLS system, and then this is where I have my template. So I have a template for my listings and the teams set up, and then with that, it automatically has kind of all of my listing presentation pages. So I have my agent resume. I've got some reviews for 23116. I've got articles that have been written up about me. I've got my latest reviews that automatically pull, our marketing plan, marketing flyer, and then it automatically does all this stuff into a nice user-friendly CMA. But one of the other things I do with exporting into a spreadsheet is I'm very analytical. So I'm definitely on that side of numbers and spreadsheets and all that stuff, and so this is how it spits it out for me from Matrix, and then I create some other columns. So I tell folks, look, I like to look at it through a couple different lenses, and so this first lens right here is for tax assessed values. So for this column here, I basically take the sales price divided by the assessed price to kind of figure out how homes sell against their assessed values. And what I usually tell sellers is some sellers think whenever the house is assessed at is when it's worth, which that's usually drastically wrong, and in a good way, because you want to pay less taxes than when the house is actually worth. But I always run this number, and then I take that number and I create an average number. And so then I tell folks, statistical average is usually I see this number about 112 to 120% above their assessed value. So in your neighborhood, it's actually a little bit more on the generous side. On average, these homes sold for 127% above their assessed value. Your most recent assessed value was 397. You multiply that together, you're at 506. And then I say a lot of other sellers like to think whenever Zillow says their house is worth, it's when it's worth. And I usually say a bunch of realtors will tell you how Zillow is wildly inaccurate and that it's a total mess. But I actually think Zillow is almost pretty much spot on. And I run these numbers with all my sellers, and traditionally Zillow just gets it wrong by about 1 to 3% wrong. And usually Zillow is always high. So Zillow is always a little bit high, and usually they're high by about 1.3%. And I do that same statistical average with how houses sold of their sales price versus their Zestimate. My CMA thing spits those Zestimate numbers out for me, and then I just have to type these numbers in manually. But sure enough, these houses sold at approximately 98.7% of what they were estimated at. This house currently was estimated at 487,300. So if you multiply those two together, based off Zillow numbers, your house would sell at 481. And then I also look at price per square foot. A lot of people think houses, they sell for, on average price per square foot. I think price per square foot is a horrible metric, and I usually tell folks this because it doesn't account for, do you have 5 acres or do you have 1 acre? Are you oceanside or are you landside? Do you have a brand new kitchen or an old kitchen? Do you have a 3-car garage or no garage? Like, so many things are wrong with price per square foot, but I tell folks I look at this nonetheless because it gives us a pretty good benchmark to see what's going on. And so I'll still use it in one of the lenses that I look through. On average, things sold for $195 a square foot. That gets you 481. So we got 481, 506, 481. Also in my CMA, there's a summary page that automatically puts, and it gives me the average sales price. So average sold price was 474 for my comps. Original list price was 464, so that's a pretty telling story. On average, things sold for 102% above their list price. On average, they sold for 10 days. So I'll kind of go over all these different things. And so now, for me, the way that I kind of use it is now I've got a bunch of different numbers. I got 481, 481, 506, 474. And so, I would tell folks, and this is where I'll make a judgment call on the spot of my listing agreement of, hey, I think, probably a strategy for your house would be to list at 479, 950. And then we'll kind of see what the market does with that. I think it'll sell kind of in and around there. Certainly I wouldn't want to be over 500,000 because of a pricing strategy of, you always want to be under a big $50,000 drop down menu because everybody's putting an upper limit on. So that's where I would price it. And then again, knowing that I studied Green Ridge, the 3 houses that sold in Green Ridge were like 470. Actually, we can see it on here. Let's say like 470, 480, and 470. Yeah, Green Ridge is right here, 470, 480, and 415. So actually that one's, let's see, that might be an active or a pending. That one's not a closed one, but the ones that are Green Ridge are 470, 480, so we're right in that sweet spot. So this is my CMA, so that cloud CMA prints it like this. The office here at Twin Hickory is where I stole this idea. They got this nice little combine little tool, so I punch all my holes and do the little plastic cover, do this. I take this to my listing appointment and I literally go over this almost page by page, and I tell folks like on the front end of, this is my comparative market analysis. The first half is just all of my marketing fluff, and it's gonna be talking about me and how I get as many homes sold as I do. The second half is probably the part you're gonna be most interested in. That's looking at the houses that have actually sold. And by the end of this, I'm gonna give you a price that I think we should list for, and give you some good expectations of kind of where I think your house would sell. So I always want to give them like, hey, we are gonna get to the numbers, eventually, because that's in essence the only reason why they invite you to their house is they want you to give them a number. So I tell them that on the front end, but I also tell them like, I'm gonna talk about myself here. need to know first, because I'm trying to, you know, it's a sales presentation, it's a sales pitch, and so I don't want to necessarily gloss over all of that, and then just give them what they want. And I do that too with friends and family. Like, it doesn't matter who they are, they get the full deal. So, all right, that's all I got.
The full time.
Okay.
So just remember, what I'm gonna walk you through is what you're physically gonna need to do in MLS, or however you do it. I don't know if I have a similar approach to the first two guys or not. I'm not saying my approach is the right approach, or even close to the right approach. I can tell you it's been effective for me, and that most of the time.
Are there more handouts?
Oh yeah, sorry, John. Will you guys mind sharing that one?
That's fine. We don't have to watch yours.
These, and cycle this around, try to get this back to me if you can. That is something I give every seller of mine. Again, it's a much more primitive version than what I actually give them, but it does factor in to my overall listing presentation and market analysis. It's where I clarify a lot of stuff. It's where I show them that these things are important where they may not have thought that they were important. But at the end of the day, I know that every seller really cares about the bottom line numbers. So what I'll do is I'll try to go starters, middies, and finishers in terms of how we go about this. And for starters, for me, it's fact finding. This is typically where I spend the second most amount of time. I try to do it in a quiet environment where I'm not bothered, so that I'm truly present on what I'm trying to research. I would be really surprised if these guys didn't tell you that it starts with the tax records, right? You have a certain amount of information from your client, you pull the tax records. I feel that the most important items are verifying the number of rooms, bedrooms, square footage, I say etc. with the seller, especially if there are any discrepancies. First off, it's a chance to talk to the seller and get more information from them that might factor into your market analysis before you set foot in the house. But it's really just a verification that you're not going to show up and end up looking a little silly because of the discrepancies, right? If we're talking about a 400 square foot discrepancy and we're talking price per square foot, that's something that can make things confusing. The other things you want to note, the overall lot size, that can come in handy. Number of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, subdivision, and then any other information you feel like you might need for your MLS search. I cite HOA as an example, right? Is it in an HOA or is it not? If it's not, I'm not necessarily bringing those into my market analysis if I don't have to. And then probably the main point for me is I believe in keeping people on the phone in a comfortable conversation so that I can extract the information from them that I feel like I need. So in all of this, with all of this research, a thorough interview with your seller, in my opinion, is mandatory. And it should be something that you do early, otherwise you may miss a lot when you actually get to the championship. So at this point, we have a basic knowledge of what this asset is. We don't know much about the fit and finish details unless the seller gave that to us. But we do have enough now to start navigating MLS. Full disclosure, you can see it right here. I don't use a specific resource like Toolkit, CMA, or even what MLS offers. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's probably actually better than what I do. I've been in front of people before and just realized that too much information can be a bad thing for the wrong person. So I try to kind of know my client in terms of how much I'm gonna put in front of them. Most clients, what I end up using, full disclosure, is a quick CMA for what it's worth. I include an estimate of profit with my seller presentation too. I include that when I meet them at that first listing presentation, so you can look at the very last page in your packet, and it's again a very primitive version of an estimate of profit. You can see I even estimate seller side closing costs and put a blurb at the bottom. The reason I keep things generic is because I like to verify specifics directly with my clients. So if they have questions about closing costs, that's going to be a conversation that they and I are going to have directly, not even via email or text or something like that. So including the items above from the tax records, I started my search by using the subdivisions to find the comps. That was pretty easy. I feel like we kind of got a favor done for us here. The fact that the house is in Green Ridge and there's a couple of recent comps to work with. But I didn't stop there. To verify that my pricing was in line, I actually looked outside of the neighborhood and narrowed my parameters a little bit further. So what I did was I narrowed my square footage range and went with the elementary school district to try to broaden it a little bit, make sure my sellers weren't leaving money on the table, and to make sure that things are consistent from an appraisal standpoint. And I just said all of that. Ideally, make sure you're comparing apples and apples with this approach. If you go out into the elementary school district, but you're not really looking product A, product B, product C, there can be some discrepancies there in terms of specific location and value. So you really want to make sure that you're comparing neighborhoods that are truly apples and apples to each other. And then based on that, based on the recent sales in the last 90 days, in the neighborhood and the elementary school district, I recommend a list price of $479,950. This is a proven price that'll meet appraisal requirements, but it won't be such a high list price that it will need to be adjusted the way that some of the properties on the market have needed to be adjusted. The attractive price also leaves us an opportunity for multiple offers and potentially a higher sales price. What I believe I've done there is I promised my seller something that I know that I can deliver. If they look at recent sales in the area, they're gonna see that they're towards the top end of those sales. I am going to give them a disclaimer that there may be some things about the house that I'm gonna learn in person that day that might affect the value, good or bad. And that's an important piece to tell them, right? The fact of the matter is, I had limited information when I showed up today. Although I had plenty, it was still limited. I noticed that you added a sunroom onto the back. That is certainly gonna change our valuation, but I need to go out and do some further research before I can give you our bottom line number after today. And so from there, wrapping up, I included my package there. A battle plan is a big part of my presentation, so I make sure that I let them know, hey, we're talking $479,950 today, but we're talking $479,950 in the event that you complete the items we agree upon on the battle plan. And if we can't complete those items on the battle plan, just remember that we can't necessarily achieve our objective of getting absolute top dollar, because the product needs to match the price and the market's gonna tell us something pretty quickly either way. Let's see. And then once I believe that I have their commitment, I'll assemble their battle plan and work to help them understand that preparation is directly linked to the return on investment. What do y'all think? Is that 20 minutes? That's probably like 8 minutes.
8 minutes exactly. You said that when it said 7:00 on my watch
Let's go,
countdown.
baby. Let's go. Let's go.
Man, that was exciting.
It's
I wanted your battle plan. Explain to us more of your battle plan.
so my battle plan is coming into your home. I'll take you through the whole thing as quick as I can. The first thing I try to do is I try to calm people down. Even if you have somebody that's pretty chill and stuff, they're about to sell their house, you're about to talk about big numbers. Not everybody is comfortable with that. I assume that they're not comfortable, so the first thing I'm doing for 5 minutes or so is I'm chilling. Like, even if I don't know them, I'm trying to find some way to connect until I get us to the point where I feel like we are in a state of mind where we can start moving forward. From there, I'm gonna let them know, hey, the first thing I'm gonna tell you in writing is all of this stuff that people are gonna love about your home. I'm actually gonna limit that because I can go on and on about all the awesome stuff in your home, but that's not what they care about. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna identify the primary things that a buyer might object to. Some of these things are gonna be common. Decluttering, do a final clean, manicure the lawn prior to picture day and stuff, add some pops of color. Some of them are gonna be really specific and you're gonna know that if we don't do that, it's going to impact our chance to sell. But what I'm gonna do from there, right, I gave you the good, I gave you the bad. The third thing I'm gonna give you is suggestions. It's a very important word. I'm not telling you what to do. I don't have that control. I suggest that you take care of these things so that everything stays the way we've talked about it today, right? So the suggestions are gonna be declutter your home in every way possible. We want clean surfaces throughout for picture day. Add 3 colored potted plants to the back deck. Finish the baseboard in the master bathroom. And it's an itemized list, but not an overwhelming list. And then I tell them, if you want references to affiliates, those are laid out there on it for you. I'm not telling you to throw money at your problems. I'm just showing you a resource that you have if you need it. So they leave kind of, or I feel like I leave with them saying, okay, well, the numbers make sense to us. I can plug a couple of things in and find out exactly what I'm gonna walk away with. I don't know if any other realtors did that or not, right? And this guy's gonna give me kind of a start to finish plan and be there with me every step of the way. Why would I not list my home with him? And that's kind of how I want them to feel when I leave that day. I'm not gonna lie about this. I feel like above all, we have to be transparent with each other. I'm not gonna send them a battle plan if I don't feel like I have their commitment. I've been burned in the past probably like 5 times where people have taken my battle plans, knocked it out, and then, you know, listed with their homeboy realtor down the street. So because of the conversations that lead up to that point, I know the level of commitment I have from that client. Once I have that final conversation with them to verify that they're ready for the battle plan, I feel like at that point it's simple.
So the battle plan is part of the conversation initially, but you're not really giving that to them right up front.
Absolutely, yeah. That day, the last part of my presentation is doing that walkthrough with my iPad, room by room pictures, you know, 3 or 4 angles, and then I let them know, you know, I'm gonna go back to my office for an hour or two, kind of look through all of this and assemble a really structured plan that we can get behind. Cool? All right.
Great job.
Thanks,
You
y'all.
want to grab Big Dean?
Yeah, Dean come.
Oh, Dean's here.
Behind,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm still here. And so we'll, there's gonna be potentially lots of different questions and stuff, but kind of the intent on this was a little bit of all of the front end work of how you prepare and get ready for that listing appointment, and the differences or similarities there of how you even compile your comps or your parameters, or, you know, some of that homework stuff. And so maybe as a good interactive portion would be, what are some of the things, because I didn't get to hear all 3 of them, only got to hear yours. What was definitely something that was similar across all 3 of us, what do you think?
Tax record.
Yeah,
Okay.
that initial phase 1.
All right, what else was super similar?
You guys searched for properties very similarly through MLS.
Okay.
I think yours was a little broader than yours. I'm familiar with yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the way I learned it was cast a wide net and then try to narrow it down. I think that's sort of the point that he's making as well. And I would, if I had a little more time, I would have told you how I whittled it down a little bit further. But this was a good example of, you know, there is good relevant data for this particular property. We were talking about this earlier. So often you pull up a listing, you get a phone call, whatever it is, and there's 0 data. And we thought about trying to do a class on how you do that, because you sort of there's just, I guess, different ways to wing it, as well as there's different ways to do it systematically.
What do you guys do when there's a huge discrepancy in square footage? They put on a room that they didn't run through the county or things like that? I mean, that becomes a problem, yeah?
Yes and no. I mean, ultimately, it's not gonna change how I suggest a pricing on it. It would change how we're allowed to actually advertise it, because technically, at this point with MLS, you're supposed to, or you're required to rather, upload any documentation to support a square footage other than what's already been backed. And so with that, you would just usually use an appraisal sketch.
Yeah, we run into it on that appraisal side, that's why I was wondering how you
Yeah,
guys.
but
Yeah, Nate, I've actually had something where, like, the square footage that we have from tax records, like, it didn't come up from them, from me in any research, where the square footage was like 500 square feet different than what the appraiser came up with. So that was a little bit different than what you're talking about, but it was interesting just because the appraisal was based on that sketch. So I think paying for an appraisal sketch, if there's any question whatsoever, is a huge thing to do for your market.
Sometimes it's simple though. If let's say you've got a house that was, the box was 2,000 square feet, and then they tell you that last year they added on a 20 by 10 Florida room. Well, then in the difference is that 300 square feet or whatever, or 200 square feet. So you can just sort of draw that, a map of that, or a drawing of that, and put it in MLS.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because it doesn't have to be all that official, and some of the photographers we use, you can do floor plans and it has the sketch just with when they're doing their photos. You just have to have something to support, not just the seller told me.
Just your word.
Do you fill in the field there where it says that field below square footage, where it says
If you put
finished
other,
square footage
get ready to be
description?
audited, yeah. I mean, if you put other and you don't have a supplement, they're gonna flag you. So, or you just don't put in other.
But you still put per tax. but you put in other description.
No, I only put per tax if it's,
On the tax
if it's
records.
per tax,
I forget what the drop downs are, but it used to
Others.
say
There
per
used to be
seller.
per seller, yeah.
But I don't think that's.
Fine. So let's think about those similarities of whittling down. Sounds like square footage is one of them, right? Did everybody use square footage?
Well, and I think it's important to note, you mentioned the price per square foot thing. I agree completely. It's just like price per square foot, look at it, but other than that,
It's a
doesn't bring up
lens. I mean,
anything.
I kind of think of like, I think the illustration is like a diamond. Like, you know, when you look at a diamond, every different angle, there's different faces to it. And so I'm trying to get ahead of what somebody might really be clinging on to, so that I already have my objection essentially on the front end. Like, yeah, I understand that, and it's something we're gonna look at. But if that was true, we wouldn't need realtors, we wouldn't need appraisers. Every county and school system
Right.
would be exactly, priced the same. But did anybody, do you do bedrooms?
I do bedrooms, but
You do
one of the comps that I had, they had like, there's only 3 bedrooms, they turned the one in Castlewood.
Uh-huh.
If you saw the thing I handed out, that they had turned a bedroom into a closet, and they were saying it was a bedroom, but that really isn't a bedroom, so you
Yeah.
detract for that. And then another one that I had was, I think it was one in King's Charter, they turned the garage into a finished area, which is nice in certain things, but usually that doesn't, if there's no garage and they were like that, people expect.
It's usually goes,
Yeah, but, and that can't be included in that square footage.
If
either.
it's,
be-
it can be, yeah.
It's cool,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, even if it's got, you could see the garage door, but it was heated and cooled, so.
That's always a tough one to talk to sellers about, because it's like they think it's great because their square footage is bigger, but usually people buying in that neighborhood want a garage.
Yeah, I had a guy in Wyndham, we were talking about price per square foot, and he's like, oh, well, then I'll just finish off my detached garage, and now my house is worth $200,000 more. I was like, it doesn't work that way, like, so.
I think one thing that all of you guys did, and Dean, I kind of made like, the one thing for each of you guys, but Dean works a lot off of just kind of, and I know either if there's more time would have narrowed it way more, further down, but Dean works kind of off feel. Like, this house definitely doesn't work. I mean, you can tell that it's 30 years older. But I think all of you guys did that. Like, you take the obvious ones and get rid of them. Like, all of you guys clearly did it, which I mean is obviously the right thing to do, but it was like a split foyer or something in topotomy. You're like, yeah, I mean, it shows up in the numbers, but it's not the same house.
And sometimes I don't eliminate any. I love that, because then I can say, look, this is all I did.
All
With
of it,
these
yeah,
numbers,
start real wide, yep.
Here's our searches. So some people do bedrooms. I don't do bedrooms ever. That's why I do the square footage. I only do well, actually, really never. I only do bedrooms if it's like 2-bedroom or something like that. What about bathrooms? You guys do bathrooms?
Situationally, like if my property has got me looking for something similar,
Like, I'll do it if I'm well, I guess, yeah, if I only have like 1 bathroom, I might only look at other 1 baths. Or if I have 5 bedrooms and 3 baths, I might look at other 5 bedrooms and 3 baths. Otherwise, because I usually say anybody who needs 5 bedrooms, usually they need an extra bathroom too. So, some people think, oh, my house has 5 bedrooms, so it's worth more than a house that has 4 bedrooms. And I say, no, it's not, because anybody that needs that many bedrooms usually needs more bathrooms.
And subdivisions like that, like if it's 2.5 bathrooms, like whether you have 4 or 5 bedrooms doesn't really matter that much. It's 2.5. So like I use bathroom situationally, and if you went and said like, okay, 4 to 5 bedrooms, 2.5 to 3.5 bathrooms in Atlee and Hanover High School, and you just do the quick CMA past 180 days, like the highest priced ones all have 3.5 baths, because naturally those need more square footage, and those are probably gonna have 5 bedrooms, but you might have some 5 2.5s. So in that regard, like never use, like you wouldn't look at bedrooms in that regard at all, because the 2.5 bathrooms are going to be the most comparable.
The other thing is being familiar with the house, so like
Right.
the brick one in the bottom down there in Green Ridge, that has 3 full baths. But the full bath is on the first floor, and there are no bedrooms on the first floor.
So pointless.
So I don't really know how, I mean, especially in that case,
Yeah.
that if you put a lot of weight on bathrooms, that's not gonna,
Right.
it's not very relevant.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff you have to talk to your clients about too, because when the feedback comes out and it ends up being that, I always think about like, if you know a punch to the stomach is coming, it's better to just get it knocked out. You're getting punched in the gut regardless. Like let's go ahead and get it done and start kind of healing them up and, you know, put some phone book around their midsection, you know, as time goes on.
Yeah, that's where preemptively on the homework side, my favorite question to ask is, what would you like to see your house listed at?
Yeah.
And I also ask them if they know what their loan payoff is, if it's financed, but what would you like to see your house listed at? Most folks are gonna say, I don't know, that's what you're here for. Every once in a while I'll get somebody and they either give me a low number, which is great, so then I can come to the appointment and say, hey, I've got great news. Or if they're out in la la land, then I can know that I'm gonna be walking into something that I'm really gonna have to like fight and get ahead of.
Another good one is, are there any, you know, when you're pre-qualifying, so are there any comparable sales in the neighborhood or the area that you really want me to make sure that I bring along? Because a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, my next door neighbor sold for $579.
Just recently, and then you look at it and say, that was 6 years ago.
Or it sold for $379.
It just sold, yeah.
Or even sometimes, I ask that question for the same reason, but sometimes they may have, their neighbor's house may have sold, but it wasn't on MLS. Sometimes I've run across that too.
Yeah, or when you're looking at your stuff, you just missed it, and you'd look like an idiot if you didn't have it, so it's a good thing for a number of reasons.
Years ago, I feel like I used to do a lot more tax record searching of if I missed anything on MLS. I haven't done that recently.
Yeah,
I don't ever search tax records for comps. It's just sometimes I hear from the owner that their neighbor's house.
I thought it was interesting that you both do look at this estimate, and
Yeah.
just to kind of.
You should be aware of it.
You know, being aware of it, and then I thought that your ratio, assessment versus, you know, actual sales price, and also versus, the not the square footage, but the,
Taxes.
taxes.
Yeah, I'm definitely not smart enough.
Speaking of that,
Who's creating these
It's a little different, but it just really narrows it down, but bottom line, y'all came to the same conclusion pretty much in 479.
Yeah, the Zillow thing is pretty good for like a normal house because they're always high. So that's a nice little line you can use with somebody right out of the get-go. Zillow's pretty good, but it's always on the high side. So now they already know, okay, I'm not gonna be more than Zillow.
Right.
I'm gonna be less than Zillow.
but I thought it was interesting that your Zestimate averages were the same as your price per square foot.
Yeah,
Was that just a coincidence?
But that's
That was pretty
that's all
darn
Zillow can do, because
Right.
Zillow's
It's just the numbers.
Certification versus
Yeah.
Right.
typically when I run all these numbers, I have like 4 or 5 lenses. Like on a let's just call it a normal house. I mean, there's a large preponderance of evidence of this range. It's a narrow range. Now, certainly there's things that get wrong and there's outliers that are wrong. And then, you know, one of the easy things that maybe you guys just need to know as a whole for Zillow is it only works if the house isn't listed or it hasn't been listed in a while. Because if the Zestimate on that house right now is 482 or whatever it is.
41, yeah.
If I decide to list it today for $600,000, guess what the Zestimate today is gonna be?
602.
Like 602, 601. Yeah, so like it only kind of my math and stuff, because it's constantly recalibrating to the freshest, newest data there is, and so.
Yeah, they factor in homes that have not sold, so if it, you know, expires, it's still a keynote on there where it's still skewing numbers and all that too.
and active is part of their
Correct,
Yeah.
deal too.
Well, and likewise, like I just listed my own house and sold it, the day before I listed my house, it was like 612. I decided to list for $599 to kind of see where it would bid up, and so it went down, you know, likewise. It's you just have to be careful with some of that stuff.
So how often you guys driving around or previewing these houses before you go? And then also, I mean, it's something that I try to do. I try to get pictures of the house before I get on the listing appointment. So I say, hey, can you give me a preview? That way I'm not walking in blind to kind of get an idea for what it looks like so I can find the most comparable houses. Do you guys do anything
So
like that?
I studied under Mike Chenault, and he just cheats. And so I just cheat, and I just call the other listing agents, you know, on anything and say, hey, tell me what your activity was. And
Yeah, I do a lot of, I'm talking about for that.
You're talking about for
specific
the house you're going to
going
list.
I can tell you, I know when I do that, which
Yeah.
I don't do it as much now as I used to do, it's more effective. You sound more credible if you've been in those houses.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's also-
I'll show up early and I'll drive
Yeah,
the comps so that I can say, like, not all of them, like if I have 10, I'm gonna do like the neighborhood ones. And at least so I know
Well,
where they're at.
Just to clarify, Kevin's talking about like the house you're going to list. You ask your potential client to send you pictures of their house. That's what you're asking, right?
Somewhat, yeah, and then also to just drive around, and I think we'll get into that spot more here in the future, but I know we used to be able to go and actually preview the active competition to
Yeah.
see how you truly stack up, so you know, before, I mean, right now things are selling. so
There's
fast,
certainly no
stuff
negative to
go,
doing
but-
that. I can't imagine there.
The more information you have, the better.
Yeah,
Pre-planning,
just a
pre-planning is,
And,
Yeah.
and if you've shown it to your own buyers and you've got your buyers' feedback,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
on that house,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, I mean, all that stuff helps.
The seller thinks you're an expert if you say, I've been in this house,
Correct.
I've been in this house.
I sold this one and, you know, I brought the buyer for this one, you know, stuff.
When trying to list that house too, I think going there is valuable if you're trying to run comps and you're kind of striking out with the way you usually do it. I think a visit to the neighborhood, if it's in a neighborhood, or definitely to the house will help.
I just from experience when you walk into a house and you're like, man, my pricing's way off because this is way more updated, this is
Yeah.
trashed. I mean, that's always good things to know, just to help expectations.
And,
issue
you know, like
brand
Jake, like the
properly.
one that I showed where Jake said it was the dog track.
Yep.
That house, the pictures really aren't that bad, but if you see some of the pictures that he has of the house, I mean, it looks like I wired it.
Yeah.
And you haven't seen my wiring, but it ain't good. I mean,
Um,
they're like stapler and electric tape would be high tech, like, stuff compared to what they've done.
paint is holding stuff together.
So I guess I was still thinking through like how we kind of whittle down. I think you and I did elementary school. Do you do elementary?
I did
school?
high school in this case.
High school in this case, yeah. So I mean, sometimes you kind of tweak those. Do you have a number that you try to get to for like your total search? Like I was kind of saying 10.
Well, like
Focus on
my
that?
initial one came up was like 30. I would have whittled it down. I think in the thing I had, there was maybe 5 solds and a couple pendings, maybe. I can't remember.
Do you try to aim for a specific
Yeah,
number?
5.
Minimum 5.
Minimum 5.
But I don't, and I might be wrong, I don't wanna go with too many comps because I feel like that can be bad for sellers too. So like.
Again,
5,
like we do the personality profiling class, if you know somebody is highly analytical, you may not wanna have it all, I mean, you don't necessarily need to plan to go over 30 comps, but you might wanna have that data ready, you know, for that. And if it's somebody who you know is expressive or whatever else, and you know, you may wanna just try to stick to the point.
Yeah, that reminds me, one other thing I'll do, like if I know the price is $480, I might do a quick CMA of everything for all of Atlee or everything for all of Atlee and Hanover, like $430 to $530 of active stuff. Basically say, just to have that in my folder, be able to say, look, here's all of our competition. And there's nothing on the, if there's nothing listed, then that's great. If everything listed is brand new construction, you know, you're just gonna have a conversation of, now that we have our price based off of our funneling, open it back up to kind of say, here's everything we're competing against though, just so you know, buyers have options. I used to eliminate, you know, foreclosures and that was very early on, I stopped eliminating foreclosures and stuff. And I would tell people while I'm showing that house of like, yeah, this house is a foreclosure, it's really run down, but I included it anyways because a buyer may have chose to buy this and fix it up. Like, we have to know what's out there or could be, you know, picked from, so.
Guys, as you can tell, we'll wrap this thing up. As you can tell, they all do it differently. I mean, like Tommy's super analytical, Larry kind of understands a little bit more than they are, gives a range, and Deane's more feel and experience, but they all still know the different ways to do it depending on the client. I would just urge you guys, especially if you can look up here and say, I can definitely beat one of these guys in a competitive listing presentation, then maybe you're squared away. But I would guarantee that all of us are on the same page, that we're probably gonna have a tough time beating one of these 3 guys. So the cool thing about Hometown is that you have people that will run listing appointments with you. You have people that will help you with this stuff. So use the experience that we have here. Because I'm telling you right now, there's very few listing agents better than this. I don't know if anybody can sit here and say, I would definitely beat one of these guys in a competitive situation. So just consider that in your prep when you're asking for help.
Yeah, and what's neat in that is, even though we use different methods or have a different style, it sounds like we got around the same
All same price. Yep.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, I said 470.
If you guys had the same price, you were a little higher.
I said 450.
If Chanel told me ahead again, he would have done 550.
No doubt.
Take the listing, take the listing, take the listing.
Yeah, thanks you guys thanks for coming.
That was great.
Good job.